When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back. It's the HTML All Things Podcast. It's a bit of a working title. Might stick with it, but a bit of a working title for now. Oh, immediately getting a phone call as well. Actually, as a side note, I get about 12 spam calls a day now. And that's not exaggerating. I do have two phones. I get about 6 each. Sometimes it's 6 and 4, whatever. And just like this one, this is yet again another spam call. But anyway, this is the HTML All Things Podcast. Working title is More Than Just a Website. And this episode is going to kind of focus on the customer. I don't know if you'd say the customer experience, more like the customer perspective of how they deal with stuff. So what I mean by that is you go into a meeting with them and they're like, hey man, like, let's just make a website. Let's do this and that. And they kind of like just bombard you with a bunch of, I don't know, like almost like a wish list of things that they want you to do. But the thing is their perspective isn't filled with context, if that makes sense. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And remember, we have an up to 20% off Scrimba discount link. You can go check that out. It is an affiliate link. It'll be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. Okay, so just like I was mentioning in the introduction, customers often make the mistake that their website is, quote unquote, just a website, right? Meaning that it's simply just what they can see on the surface. Some images, some content writing. Maybe they'll even see, deep enough into, say, like the pages themselves. So they'll kind of acknowledge that these are product pages, these are landing pages. They'll certainly see design elements. Like, headings are this way, text is this way, images are light boxed, things like that. But behind this sort of composed and polished veil hides the chaos and complexity that is as difficult to implement as it is time consuming. And this is a recipe for disaster if you're expecting to just throw something together. And I do blame, sometimes that I shouldn't say blame. What it is I think that a lot of people have websites and there's a lot of website builders out there. And I use them, right? I use them to help clients out, especially if they've already invested in a website builder. They just need some help. But I think that the general consensus, or maybe the general sort of opinion, is that, hey, there's a website builder, it must be very easy to make a website. And that's just not the case. So in this episode, I'm going to kind of dive into the various kind of complexities that are beyond that sort of like polished veil, beyond that, hey, this is like the full complete website, to dive into what are the inner workings, what is that inner chaos, that time consuming engineering and thought process and putting things together that makes a website more than, quote unquote, just a website. First thing I want to touch on is the CMS. So just think about this, client says to you, I want to be able to edit my website myself. And to them, it's probably just something as quick as, hey, just quickly set me up with a blog editor, no big deal. But let's kind of take that a different direction. Let's think about all the websites that you've worked on over the years. And when I say you, I'm talking more to a person that has worked on, maybe worked at an agency, worked at as a freelancer, things like that, where it's just like tons and tons of different options for you, or not options for you, but options that you've given to clients. Like you've worked with construction websites. You've given them an option of a landing page. You've given them an option of a business card website. Maybe they're running a special event and you're trying to do that. And that's like a consumable website where it's only during that 5-day event. Maybe it's a blog to help them with their SEO, but you don't just stop at, construction websites. You also go into news websites and tech websites and personal blogs and like gardening websites. And there's all these different contexts and all these different bits of content in all those different form factors, like the landing page, a business card site, and the other ones I've already mentioned. So each of those sites have unique needs. And those unique needs are based on the content that they cover, but they also have unique needs based on the goal of the site itself. So the thing that stands out to me the most with that last comment is specifically the consumable event website, where maybe a construction company is having some sort of grand opening. They have like a charity event going on at the same time. And so they're running this sort of like gala or something like that. It's like, well, they're not going to have a gala website for that all the time. Maybe this is a one-off thing. This isn't annual. This is the grand opening. And so that's a very unique goal. It's a very unique need on the website and on the developer for that matter, because the developer has to create the website that fulfills that need. Now, when we interviewed, or when I interviewed Per Borgen, we had a brief discussion on how web developers assume a lot when they put websites together for people. And the big thing that kind of came up in the episode was, what fields go into their CMS? And this is like a really true thing to say because, I mean, I'm not a construction expert. I'm not an electrician. I'm also not a mechanic. I'm not a gardener. I'm not all these things, but I have worked on websites for people that are in the excavating business. I have worked on websites for landscapers. We've worked on websites for retirement homes. We've worked on, all these different things. And, if I zoom into the retirement home one just for a second, I had no idea that there were specific types of retirement homes. Like I knew there was like retirement apartments versus like, a care facility. I understand that. But I didn't know that, at least in this jurisdiction in Canada, like there's specific things where it's like, oh, this is considered like a specific name for legal purposes. This is considered a specific thing for legal purposes. This is the market name for this type of lease deal. This one over here is not lease, it's rent. This one over here is actually a care facility, but you're allowed to leave. This one is a care facility, but it's locked down. There's all of these sort of things. And it's like, I didn't understand like all the intricacies of this stuff. And just as a quick hot take, and this is also from that interview that I did. I will link that in the show notes as well if you want to listen to that interview. But having expertise in a non-development field can come in handy here. Like if you're experienced in construction and you go to build a construction company's website, there's less assumptions. Like, there's like certain regulations that has to be done with certain excavators or something like that. Or that like, oh, this excavator is only good for topsoil. So you're not going to put into the CMS, like, what does this thing do and have like 5 fields? That this excavator, this piece of equipment is only for topsoil. So you only need 1 field, or heck, you may not even need a field. If the person selects that excavator, it just shows topsoil in a static manner on the website because that's what that thing does. So when you're setting up a CMS, you have to consider a lot of things. I mentioned a lot of these here, but I'll kind of like get into the nitty gritty. So like how the data is actually organized is one big thing. Like, what are the CMS collections, which is a Webflow term, but I like it in general. What are the CMS collections going to be? So like think about almost like separate databases or maybe separate tables, however you're going to structure your data from the back end. We're not getting into all that, but how are you going to structure that data or organize it for the user? Like when they go into their CMS and they click like add new, what's in that menu? Is it add new blog post? Is it add new call to action? Is it add new poster, add new slides for the slider? Like you have to consider all these things and how you're going to organize and collect these bits of data and put them into collections so that it's easy to understand, it's easy to use, and the person knows what they can and cannot edit. And they can also request things like, hey, I noticed there's no way for me to edit the slider. Can we add like an add slide, and like how will that work and things like that? So let's just say you get right into your blog post, right? You say, okay, we know what all the blog posts are. We know where they're going to live. And so we're going to go into validation now. Well, validation ensures that the content works inside the design, but it also ensures that the site does not become bloated. So let's consider something here. You have a blog post that's in here, and you have a title, simple enough, but you also have what I call an SEO title and an SEO description. And then you have your rich text, which is for your actual content that they're actually writing, the actual blog post itself. Well, there's going to be some validation that at least I think you should have in here. The SEO title and the SEO description are the metadata, right? They're the things that are pumped into Google. They're pumped into search engines that like is what the search engine takes as the title and description. Yes, I know Google can change those, but still, it's what's kind of presented to them. And Google is not going to change their design to accommodate like a 750 character title. So a bit of validation you might do is you might say, okay, the character count must be below 60. If you have an SEO strategy that requires that the title must be between 55 and 60, which is what we use on our website, it's like, hey, put that limitation in there. It may be a little inconvenient for the user when they go in, but that validation will ensure that our SEO strategy is respected throughout the entire website. Another big one is also people uploading images and uploading media. You have to have a heck of a lot of text in order for things to become bloated as in terms of file size. Like you have to have a lot of text. Like text is not doesn't take up a lot of space. However, images can. Like images can be 8K, they can be, raw format, they can be a JPEG, they can be a PNG, a WebP, they can be an AVIF. Like it's like all over the place, right? There's a lot of different things you can do with an image, and therefore a lot of different file sizes. Like file sizes could be 10 kilobytes, could be 200 megabytes. Like it's all over the place, as well as the resolution. Is this thing 1080p? Is it 720p? Is it a square at least? Is it 100 by 100? Well, if I'm asking for a square, are all users going to know I need 100 by 100, or are some users going to upload 1080 by 1080, and then like the browser has to resize that? That's going to hurt our performance. Like what's going to happen here? And so validation becomes really important, because you go in there and you say, I demand, like a profile picture. Let's say I demand a profile picture, and I demand a profile picture at 100 kilobytes or less. It has to be 1-to-1, and it has to be 100 pixels by 100 pixels or less, whatever your parameters are. Now, I will say this one in particular is particularly challenging. I don't put this on too many customer websites because, just to be blunt, many of my customers don't understand this. They don't understand it, and I would have to explain to them what file sizes are, what file formats are, what things are like this. So it is a bit of an issue, and even though I put these restrictions in place, they're just not going to get it, and they're not going to want to listen to me kind of train them in that. So sometimes it's just sort of like, okay, I'm going to set a hard limit at like 10 megabytes or something, and like let's just hope they don't do that, because many of my customers will go in, look at the page, and be like, why is my page taking forever to load? Then they'll call me and be like, hey, why is it taking forever to load? I go, look, I'm like, hey, that image has got to be compressed, and then that's the fix. But for people who are versed in this, having those validations inside of the image fields is great. And I mean, that doesn't just end with images. I mean, I mentioned images, but you don't want to have, like, let's say your website, your design, your whatever, all like adheres to a PDF. Like, let's say the design automatically populates a PDF icon, and your file system or your server that's serving all the files, it only serves in PDF. Like it only allows PDFs to be downloaded for a security reason. But the CMS, maybe you never limited it to just PDFs, and you've allowed it to be, Word documents and other things along that nature, TXT files, things like that. Well, now we have an issue where like they're uploading that, they're publishing it from the CMS, and then the actual design is making it look like a PDF when it's actually a TXT, and you can't download that. So having those validations in place where it's like, hey, that has to be PDF. Like, stop what you're doing. That must be PDF. That's really good. Like, that's something that's going to help people. It's a little inconvenient again for the user editing it, but it's going to be helpful in the long run. Another thing here is going to be field UX. Like, users need to be able to quickly understand what to edit and where. Having good labels, having good helper text. So like having things like, thumbnail image, and then your helper text might be the thumbnail image appears in the hero, or the thumbnail image appears only on the homepage when this post appears in the homepage, or this is only for featured posts, things like that. And then another step of validation is maybe you require it as well. And that's also part of field UX. So the person knows when they open up their blog post, they go click, new blog post, they can see, okay, what's required here? I need an image. I need a good slug. I need my SEO title, my SEO description. I need to have a thumbnail image. And then they're able to go, let's say, to the marketing department, if that's how the company works, and say, hey, everybody, like, I need SEO friendly this and that, this. I need an image made up is a very common one. I need an image made up from the media department, things like that. And they're able to very quickly see that. That's good field UX. That ties in directly with the validation as well. And ultimately, what you're trying to do with the validation and the field UX, or at least this is what I try to do, is I'm trying to prevent the user from making mistakes. I want to prevent as many mistakes as possible. You don't want the user to make changes that they don't mean to, or waste time uploading files that aren't the right format, with the TXT example that I gave earlier, right? Validation helps with this a lot, for sure, but good field UX helps even further. And this is why I want to mention this. It's kind of a marrying of the two topics. Like, what is the goal with validation and field UX? My opinion, it's to prevent user mistakes. It's to give them a good experience and allow them to edit without worrying all the time. I mean, we've all worked, like Mike and I have worked on websites where, let's say someone else has set it up, maybe it's 10, 20, who knows, years old, and the user is terrified to go into the CMS. The customer is terrified because every time they press publish, the site goes down for some reason and they don't know why. And it's like, that's bad UX. Like, you don't want to have that. And then you go look and it's like, oh, well, you're uploading files here or images that are 30 megabytes. The site's still uploading, but there's no upload indicator. And first of all, the image shouldn't be that big to begin with. And now, like, you press publish, the site doesn't know what to do because it's still trying to upload and then it crashes. And then you got to call it tech, things like that. It's like, no, like, let's try to make some good UX. Let's have some confidence, give the user confidence that they can go in and edit a product or edit a blog post or edit things that they need to, edit a call to action, and have the design and the website actually respond to that appropriately.
CMS is probably the biggest one for me for how complex a website can get, because CMS can mean a million different things, including an entire database infrastructure that provides capabilities of, hosting and serving the content in an efficient way. Like, it can get very, very deep very quickly from a technical side. But what I want to talk about right now is actually not the technical aspect of it, but the selling aspect of it. Every company that I've ever consulted at, joined, worked at, usually when I come in, all the marketing people, all the people touching a CMS will complain about the CMS. Whether there's a lack of features, whether the CMS is unstable, like Matt's saying, bad UX, whether there's just something wrong with it, whether there's nothing wrong with it, but they just want to do something differently. And in my opinion, a lot of that comes from bad, like, expectation setting, requirements gathering when you initially start the process of picking a CMS, implementing a CMS, and then teaching the company how to use a CMS. What you need to do on the CMS front is really understand that no matter which choice you make, there's going to be limitations, right? You're going to need to know those limitations very well and present those limitations to the proper stakeholders, the people that are going to be using the CMS and consuming it, in a very easy to understand way before you go about actually implementing anything. If you tell them that, hey, we're choosing the CMS because A, it's fast for us to implement, but B, you will not be able to update and create new pages on the fly. You'll still need to contact us for that. Because this is fast to implement, we're losing that feature. Like, you can't make a marketing page from scratch on the fly. Some CMSs offer that, but it's hard to implement, et cetera, et cetera. If you tell them that up front and they tell you, no, we need to create landing pages, that's a requirement of our application, then you know that you have to choose the harder and slower way to do it. And then you can sell it to them as, hey, it's going to take me a little bit longer, but I'm going to get there. And then when you go down that route, you can be like, okay, there's probably 15 different options for creating landing pages. There's ones that are super templated. Hey, do you want that? This one will be a little bit faster, a little bit easier to use. Or do you want the fully custom way, but it's going to take you a while to kind of build those pages? And tell them the gives and takes of that. So when you're choosing a CMS, you also need to sell it, set expectations as low as you possibly can, by the way. Again, under promise, over deliver. Yeah, under promise, over deliver is the right way. That is really, really important in this specific case. Otherwise, and you still might get some complaining, but otherwise you're going to get an epic amount of complaining, because this is going to be the thing that all the internal people are going to be interfacing with. And anytime they have an issue, they're going to come to you being like, hey, this isn't working. Why did you implement it this way, et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to compound to look bad on you. Like, I've seen people be, removed from their positions for this. So you need to take the choice of the CMS very seriously, and you need to take the implementation, the requirements gathering, and the setting of expectations, really key here. Set expectations once you make that choice, once everyone signs off on it, and then continue to reiterate that as you go down the line, because your team might change. When a new salesperson comes on, there should be a document saying what the CMS can do and what the CMS can't do, so that they go in right from the start knowing, like, hey, okay, they've chosen this is what it can do. That's going to make it for a really good experience. So tough to balance, and I guarantee you're still going to get some pushback, but you need to limit that as much as possible.
You know what, though? Like, I mean, this is one of those things where, like, the spirit of this episode is customers just being like, oh, it's just a website, just put an editor in. And your points, Mike, like perfectly align with that, because the amount of times that we've been asked, hey, just throw this website together, and they've either A, not asked to edit their own content, so we haven't installed the CMS, and all of a sudden, oh my God, how do I edit this? And it's like, well, you never asked for that. Like, that's a feature, and they just assume it's like something that kind of comes with it, right? And then you also have the other side of the fence where they just say, yeah, just like let me edit it. And then when they go to log in, I've had literally people go like, was this WordPress? I'm like, no. And they're like, well, like I thought this would be WordPress. It's like, why would you assume it was going to be WordPress without mentioning WordPress, right? So it's good to go through those specific things and have that conversation with your clients and say to people, hey, like what you said, like go through all the steps and say, hey, you know what? Like this is how this is going to be. If you want like a what you see is what you get editor, these are going to be the drawbacks. It's going to take longer to edit. It's going to take longer for me to develop. Whatever the situation entails. Or maybe it's like, hey, do we want a what you see is what you get editor just for the landing pages? Then the rest of the site can be faster. You have those conversations because you kind of have like the difficult conversations up front to get the difficulties out of the way. You don't want to have those conversations after, which is like the mistake that Mike and I made, quite a few times in the beginning days. I mean, we had a customer one time message me, must have been 6 years after their site was made. And they said, hey, can I have the login stuff? I said, what do you mean by the login stuff? And it was a simple HTML, CSS, maybe some JavaScript. I think it was maybe using Owl Carousel. Maybe. I don't even know if it was that far. And they were like, well, we need to update some of the stuff. And I said, oh, like if you have any content updates, like your phone number or whatever, you have to let me know because it doesn't have an editor. And she's like, oh, okay. And then they just disappeared. They deleted the website and they ended up making something else, but they made it with like, I don't know, GoDaddy site builder or something. Right. So they went away, and it's like, I wouldn't necessarily call that a mistake, but it's definitely an assumption thing. Right. And if that email had come in earlier, like if it had come in a couple of months after the site was made, that would look pretty bad. I mean, 6 years and we charged them like $500 or whatever. They sort of were like, okay, we're just kind of done with this. Right. Like they were done with our website. Fair enough. Like it was old. It was basic. Their business grew, time to grow up kind of thing a little bit. Talking about growing up. Scalability, big thing. Scalability and hosting. So like this is probably one of the things that I feel like scalability has become like a buzzword. And I kind of hate that. It's like people are like scalability, we need scalability. It's like, well, scalability takes a form in a lot of different things. Like, are we talking about going from, like 100,000 users a month on your website to 200, million? Are we talking about going from a simple website to a web app? Are we talking about going from a no-code tool to custom? There's a lot of things that are scalable, but in general, development is the thing that takes center stage. It's really weird. So it's like scalability is like extremely important, and hosting, because hosting is a major part of the scalability. Hosting and scalability kind of fall by the wayside, and everyone kind of gets into the whole like, okay, let's get the graphics made up, get the graphic designer in there designing things, but then they kind of forget that it's like, okay, now we have this developed product, but where does it live? And is it ready to live there? So what I mean by that is like, what are you going to do? Like, where's this thing going to live? Is it going to live on traditional cPanel hosting, like shared hosting? Is it going to live in some sort of cloud hosting, like maybe like a Vercel or a Netlify? Are you in need of a VPS? Are you in need of a dedicated server? Are you in need of load balancing? Where are you at? And this is something that I think falls by the wayside, but it should be discussed early. I don't know if it needs to be discussed first, but it does need to be discussed early. The reason why is countless projects have scaled or become too scalable. People will be like, yeah, I'm going to have hundreds of thousands of whatever users. Let's load this thing up on a cloud platform. Like let's load this thing up on AWS. We'll have load balancing. We'll have this, we'll have that, all these features. And then it's like, yeah, we're serving 200 customers a month. It's like, whoa. What's going on here? 200 customers a month. Like, what are they doing on there? Is this a web app? No, it's just a blog. It's like, well, I mean, you could definitely get away with $3 a month shared hosting. Gotta be said. But I mean, you do need to consider the fact that like, if you are aiming for that, it's like, okay, maybe we start at the $3 a month shared hosting. Your site starts to grow. What is the plan? Is the plan to go to VPS? Is the plan to go to cloud? Is the plan to go to dedicated? Like where are we at with that? And also, where is the site at with that? Like, have you gone into traditional cPanel hosting, and inside cPanel, many hosts will include kind of random, in my opinion, random one-off site builders. Some of them are actually pretty decent. Like, they'll build pages pretty good, but it's not like a, quote unquote famous one like WordPress or something. So are you really going to find a guide for like, Matt's website builder, like to transfer from the traditional cPanel hosting over to, dedicated? Like, chances are no, right? So you do need to consider that. Also, something like, something like a Webflow, where you climb up their tiers, and then the quote unquote unlimited tier is enterprise, which is behind an interaction with Webflow. I think it's a phone call where you have to have a conversation with them, and the pricing is determined based upon that. And it's sort of like, hey, like, we need to consider this, because I see on X, like, you'll see people say like, hey, I just went from $3,000 a month hosting to 67,000 or something like that, or 100,000, and this is like a huge increase, and I didn't realize the tiers. Now, I'm not saying that's specific with Webflow. I'm saying that this is with a lot of different services. Like, you do need to plan it out, where it's like, what is the thing that's using all the resources that require you to go up a plan? Is it file serving? Like, okay, should we have a separate download server that is like just doing downloads, and then the front end, the marketing end, is on Webflow or another site builder? We need to have those conversations, and you need to have them like relatively early. You don't need to get it right into the nitty gritty and come up with a perfect plan, because things change. And like I said, how many people have signed up for like crazy hosting only to serve 200 users? But the thing is like, you do need to have those conversations, and you also need to have those conversations from the DevOps side of things as well. Like, DevOps needs to know what you're doing to see if there is a good way to do staging in production. Is there a good way to stage on this particular host? Is there a good way to have staging automatically go to production, or do we need a third party in here? Do we need to have staging on a completely different server? These are DevOps questions that like empower you and potentially your devs, depending on whatever you bring DevOps in. It's something that you need to take a look at. Like, deployment pipelines, like, how are you going to deploy? Is this something simple like a WordPress site where you're using Elementor? Maybe you just take a backup of the site, and then you build the page, and if something goes horribly wrong and the site starts crashing, you revert from backup. Is that it? But or is this something mission critical? And do you need to have a deployment pipeline that can not only deploy but also revert? These are like, these are serious questions that need to be addressed. These are foundational questions, really. Like, if you think about it, like, I've described migrations to my friends that are non-technical, and they don't really get it. And I'm like, migrations, they can be pretty simple, but I was like, migrations are stressful, because what you're basically doing is you're taking the house and you're lifting the house up off of its foundations, and you're slamming it back down on someone else's foundations, on foundations in another area. And what's going to happen? Is it going to be perfect? Was it built on quicksand, and the house is going to sink, or there's going to be cracks in the walls? What's going to happen? And that's exactly what's happening here, kind of, right? Where you need to have those conversations kind of semi-early, in my opinion, to ensure things are available. Like, again, from the DevOps side, functionality. I worked with a host one time that did not allow cron jobs. And like cron jobs, period, including WordPress cron. They somehow blocked it. And it's like, well, we have, user data coming into an email form, and I'm deleting it once a day because it goes into the entries, and I don't want that. They only want it via email. This isn't good. And it's like, is this okay? Like, is this host okay? Like, how am I, the DevOps admin, how am I supposed to, run my scripts and do these things and have some automation? Like, now I'm going to have to manually do things because cron jobs doesn't work. And that's like a really specific random example. But here's the thing. If you run into one of these issues that you actually, or one of these limitations, and you need that thing to not be a limitation, this is why you need to have the conversation like relatively early, or at the very least have a plan to say, hey, this is how we're going to move on. Like, this is how we're going to go from VPS to dedicated. This is how we're going to get off of cloud. This is how we're going to go on to cloud. And this is when we're going to do it. When we hit 100,000 users, we're switching. Okay. Or we're going to schedule a conversation when we hit 50,000 users. It makes sense. Yeah, okay. Let's watch the analytics and do that.
And I think that is really, really important. That last thing you mentioned is having that plan. What I don't want people to do is assume that their application is all of a sudden going to be hitting 10 million users next week, when you don't have any proof of that. And because of that, delay your launch to launch on a Kubernetes cluster, for example, right? Like, spend 4 months, get spend millions of dollars figuring out the infrastructure for a Kubernetes cluster to then only have a situation where you have 10 people using your website and you've delayed everything to the point where you have to rebuild it again, et cetera, et cetera. So what's more important to me is, hey, let's get this out there in the fastest, most possible way that makes sense for our current scaling capabilities. I'll give an example. A lot of times these hosts like Netlify and Vercel are very, very good for quick developer operations stuff and initial scaling. They're pretty cost effective for small teams to get you to a point where you can very much test your concept to a pretty high capacity. Hundreds of thousands of users is not a big deal for those kind of platforms, especially if you're bringing in some money. But the point is like you can get there really quickly without having a DevOps team, right? So you're cutting your costs initially. But to Matt's point, having 5 million users hit your pipeline, that's where maybe you need to start getting to the point where you're like, okay, well, we've done it on Vercel. Let's now, as we're growing, now let's bring in a DevOps team to then start building parts of our infrastructure in dedicated servers across the globe, right? But you need a team for that. Like you need people dedicated for that. And that's going to obviously cost a considerable amount more. And there's this like weird curve that I've seen shown quite a few times where Vercel costs or serverless costs or whatever these like dedicated hosting platform or like these serverless hosting platform costs will often be cheaper up to the point where literally a DevOps team is able to spin up, like you're able to spin up multiple people on full-time salary. And at that point, you're paying the DevOps team a lot of money, but they're able to scale your hardware to a point where you're paying hosting a lot less money, right? So you're talking probably like a considerable amount of money. You're talking a lot of people that you have to pay to be able to do that. So you're most likely going to be able to prove your concept very, very well on a quick DevOps handled for you set, like PaaS, like platform as a service platform. And that's a perfectly viable option for you to launch quickly and test, right? So what I really, really want is for people not to quickly start to think about scaling and prevent scaling be a problem in terms of launching. It's like you need to launch to make sure your concept is viable, but launch on a platform that can scale to a certain degree. So like a shared hosting platform is probably more difficult to scale than something like, a VPS, for example, or Vercel or Netlify.
Well, the thing with DevOps as well, like I used to work as a sysadmin and I wasn't doing DevOps necessarily. I mean, I guess technically I was doing DevOps, but I was doing a lot of more like IT sysadmin level stuff, and which is very much bumping up against DevOps. But one of the things that we used to do is we used to kind of have a system. It was a little rough because we only work with like a couple of smaller teams, but what our system was is it was basically like, hey, if somebody needs like a test server, we'll spin them up a test server and then we'll spin them up like, more of a production-ish server. And this was not web development stuff. But basically what we would do is we would give them that option. And then whenever they were done testing, they would just sort of like shoot us an email. And then I would move whatever they told me to move over to like the more production ready server where they could test it and do whatever they needed to do there. Now that's a manual procedure, but it was few and far between. It was like, I did that 2-3 times and that was kind of it in a whole year in an 8-month period. So it's like, okay, like that works. But then there was a couple of times where we would be like, hey, everybody, we need you to like register your devices on a certain thing. And so my boss would be like, okay, we're making a self-serve like portal because this is ridiculous. And many of our IT tools had self-serve portals that you could just kind of turn on and then configure. But it was like, we're turning on a self-serve portal because, we're not manually doing this for like 100 employees or whatever that they're testing with. It's like, no, we're doing this. And so like, that's something that a DevOps person, when you have that conversation with them, can do. And you can kind of see how like the scalability work there too, where it's like kind of what Mike was saying, where it's like, hey, maybe we'll start with Netlify or Vercel in the free or cheaper tier. But then eventually it's like, hey, this is kind of getting kind of cumbersome. It's like, hey, let's talk to a DevOps person. The DevOps person is going to come at you with ideas like that. Where it's going to be like, hey, like, why don't we like make like a quicker, console for this? Why don't we make these self-serve portals? Why don't we make, not necessarily like a CMS, but kind of like an internal CMS where it'll configure certain things of that nature. Like, why don't we go along with that type of thing. And like that is another area. Now, I do want to say something here too, is like a lot of our clients, and like Mike, you can attest to this, they get scared when you start talking like that, where you're like, hey, we're gonna have to hire somebody, this and that. What I always like, how I always assure them, and I think it's worked like every time, is if you're at the stage where you need that, you're not gonna be in the same mindset that you are today. I mean, if you have $1 million flying in each month, you're not gonna be like, my God, we have to hire somebody. It's like, yo, we need more money. Like you're in a different place than you are today when you're starting at zero, or maybe starting at like $100 a month or something. You're going to be in a different place. Like if we reach, like I always tell them, like, this is a good problem to have. Like we've had a couple clients where their sites have crashed and we've had to upgrade them, and they're like kind of upset. Like, oh my God, my site crashed. I'm like, no. You just went from, someone who used to help like 10 people a month, and you are now at a person that is helping like 100,000 people a month. Like this is a big thing. So like, this is a big problem. Like this is a good problem to have. And now that we know that you're scaling up like this, we can have like uptime software and like read our analytics a little better and things like that. Because, some people will say to me, well, like, why wouldn't you monitor them to see when they scale up to that point? These people are literally making $0 and they're trying something. They don't have the money to like pay me to constantly check or constantly maintain or do whatever. They're just kind of doing the bare minimum. Problem happens and it's like, hey man, this is actually a good problem. It's a different world when there literally is no money on the table, whether that's investor money or like profits that you have saved and you're going to spend now. It's a different world, and we deal with a lot of people that are in that boat.
Yeah, but it does work the other way too, though. Like where if you have too much money on the table, people will tend to go the harder route just because they're like, oh, I have too much money, and like I need to justify the fact that I've been given $10 million by a VC fund or something like that. So if you're at a point in a startup where you're accelerating, all of a sudden you might spend too much time just because you have that money, when really you should be validating your product, and that's another part of this. So like it's both where like you need to consider before money even gets on the table, you need to consider what fits your neat use case.
Yeah, 100%. Like I think that this is, I mean, it's weird. It's like scalability and hosting is like super foundational, gets brushed by the wayside. Like I said, like development itself, like the graphic design and then the actual building of the components and stuff, or the visual elements, it seems to take center stage. But this stuff is like almost boring, but it's really important. And then when you talk about it, it goes in the wrong direction oftentimes. Like Mike said, someone has too much money, they want to go like, oh my God, we need, give us like 30 dedicated servers. It's like, whoa, hey, hold up. Like, hang on a sec, kind of thing. Or someone's like, no, I don't want to pay for any of this. Let's just go with this cheap thing. And like, I've had serious issues with clients who go that route and they run out of friggin' disk space and they keep running out of storage space. Like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, you're signing users up. Like those users have an account and they're uploading it, profile pictures and whatever the heck they're doing. I mean, what do you want me to do? You're on a host that's like $35 a month. Like, are you making $35 a month from this? Well, yeah. Well, you got to upgrade. Like, what? So it's very easy for these conversations, which, again, are foundational, to go the wrong way. This is another thing that I've like talked about recently in the past. I've definitely talked about it with clients recently, and that's performance and core web vitals. So after your site's, sort of all built up and looking good, and you can do this during the development as well. But I'm just talking like as if you're coming into a site in this particular context that's like already built, and you're like, hey, let's like check on the performance and the core web vitals. Now, after your site's all built up and looking good, it may not perform well. So using products like Google PageSpeed Insights can give you an in-depth look at how your website is performing, as well as other goodies like SEO score. So having poor performance can hurt your SEO rankings. This is particularly true if the performance is very bad, although people do take this too seriously. Like if they're at 65 out of 100, they're like, oh my God, no one's ever going to look at my website. That's generally not the truth. Usually what ends up killing people is if they have like a 5, 10, whatever second loading time and people get bored, or they think that the site's not working and they just press back and they go to another result. So common performance fixes. Again, I'm just kind of quickly going through this particular thing because like we could talk about this for days. And I believe we have a recent recent podcast episode about this. I can't remember now. Maybe if there isn't, I'll make one. But common performance fixes kind of on general websites is lazy loading images. You don't want to have like all the images at the bottom of the page loading when you're at the top, because the person may never scroll down there. Compressing assets such as images, of course, that's huge, because images, like I said before, can be 100 megabytes. They can be 10 kilobytes. Big difference. You can also do things like not, well, I guess it's quote unquote compressing, but it's technically minifying. You can minify your CSS and JavaScript files, which can make a considerable difference depending on how big they are, but it's not usually like absolutely massive, but it's usually super, super simple. So why not? You can start dealing with caching data. So you can manage like, okay, I'm going to cache this data, on the person's browser, or like I'm going to maybe you're going to cache some data like internally on your own backend from an API call. Maybe your server's faster than what the API call does. So maybe like your server calls the API to get updated information. You like store that, quote unquote, cache that, store that on your own database, and then you control now how fast that database responds. That's another way to do it. So like API calls, for example, like how do you want to handle those type of things? Caching data also becomes like really complex in a way because sometimes you'll notice like someone will be like super into their website, especially if you're dealing with like a hobbyist. They'll be super into it for like a couple months or something. And they'll like be publishing, and they'll publish so much that like maybe like the cache is not updating fast enough. Maybe the cache updates once a day and they're like, hey, I just published this article and I really want, people to see it. Like, why isn't this working? So you have to kind of deal with like those type of issues as well. You also have to manage what you allow to block the page load. Things like if a script is, especially if a script is remote, that may take a long time. If the script is huge, that may take a long time. You can use things like async and defer, things like that to help along with that. And also removing unused code is big as well. I know that some people will just have like a random JavaScript thing that like counts up or something because it's just like counting, anticipating like a slider or something to be there when the slider has been removed. So these are like kind of some common performance fixes. There's tons of other ones, but having the ability to use PageSpeed Insights for free, go in there and quickly kind of check on what's wrong. It'll give you like a detailed report and tell you like, hey, fix this, fix that. This is what we think is wrong. You can minify this, compress these images, things along that nature. It won't necessarily, I can't remember now if it actually specifically mentions caching data, but I know that if you like manage your data, like again, manage your API calls, manage where your data is coming from, cache the data, like make sure that the user's browser like caches it, things like that of that nature, that will just generally help the UX. And that's always good. Like it'll help the performance and the UX for the person that's actually using the website. The next thing here is going to be content strategy and SEO. So this is going to be another big one, and it's something that people absolutely just sort of like almost ignore, which is not good. So basically what you want to do is in my opinion, you want to choose the goal for your content strategy and your SEO on the onset, like right away. This is not easy. So if you can't do it right away, you should do it as early as possible because this kind of branches into so many areas of a website. It's like, it is serious at this point. If your website, for example, is a consumable event website and you don't care about SEO at all, and your marketing is going to be literally banners at that event where people are showing up to that event, scanning a QR code or typing in the URL, and they're using that event site for something that's happening at that event, and you do not care about organic traffic, that is an absolutely huge difference from a site that is relying on organic traffic and SEO. It is a huge difference from what people can fill in, what users can do in the CMS, and what like restrictions that your developer may place on you in those the different validations, things like that. We aren't going to worry about open graph images. We're not going to worry about people sharing the links because the site's going to go down. We're not going to worry about so many things. So that's a huge thing to talk about. If your site is more for a local company and you mostly get your business from, or your interest, I guess, your leads from a Google My Business card, and you just kind of want to have that website button on your page, then, maybe just having some basic SEO where you look professional, but you're not chasing keywords is what you want to do. Because you may do a ton of research or a ton of, not research, but marketing on Google My Business, and like everyone goes to your, Google Maps listing, your Google My Business card. And then they click like, oh, like there's a website button here. They click that, and that's just like something else for you to kind of present yourself. That's a huge difference from a niche site. It's a huge difference from a site that is publishing articles every day, trying to get as much traffic as they can organically. A really common phrase, and we keep saying website, we have a podcast about this, is we want to rank on Google. We want to be number one on Google, things along that nature. Okay, that's easy to say, but I mean, have you considered good information architecture, or IA as it's referred to sometimes? How is your blog set up if you have one? Do you have proper tags? Do you have categories? How is the CMS for that? Are you setting specific categories and tags for keywords? Are you setting them for specific things in your industry? Are you allowing for related posts to show up properly so that there's interlinking, but also like topical interlinking where people may actually want to see those other posts? It's not just random other posts showing up. What about different meta fields? What about the schema with proper parameters? Google is, for example, only going to show you 55 to 60 characters on titles, and they will replace any title that they see fit. So, like, you can't be like, I'm going to write about dodgeballs, but what I'm actually going to put in the title is like talking about Ryobi drills because Ryobi drills is more popular on Google. I mean, Google's going to replace that. There's going to be like Ryobi drills, and they're going to kick you out of there. That's going to be like, no, that's not the title we're using. A big one is sitemap setup and hosting. And this is mostly handled by a lot of website builders and a lot of different CMS, sitemap setup and hosting. But the thing is, get it done. Make sure it's working properly. Make sure that it's submitted to various tools, which I'll talk about shortly. But things like, Google Analytics and things along those nature. Or I guess the sitemap isn't submitted to Google Analytics. It's more so submitted to Google Search Console. But I use those two so interchangeably now. It's all a blur. But get your sitemap set up. Get your robots.txt set up. I mean, I've walked into people's websites figuratively, and they've been like, I can't rank on Google. I go look, and someone friggin' accidentally in WordPress selected just discourage SEO or discourage search engines from indexing me. And it's like, what? Or someone's gone in and made a custom robots.txt and blocked and disallowed like the main website. And you're like, what? Or they disallowed the blog. And it's like, what's going on here? Clearly a remnant from when they were maybe testing the blog functionality out. But like, check that stuff. Make sure the sitemap, make sure the robots.txt is set up properly. Also, you may want to consider things like sitemap variants. So for example, Google News has a very specific Google News sitemap that you can make and submit to Google, but it's more complex than a regular sitemap. It needs proper updating. So for example, there's various parameters, which you can find online, but one of them is the news stories that you are publishing should only be 48 hours, or at most 48 hours old in that sitemap. So you need to have something that goes in and wipes the old ones and puts in the new ones. And if there is literally nothing published in 48 hours, like as if you take the weekend off, maybe, then you need to make sure that sitemap like basically says, hey, there's nothing new. Because Google will look and be like, oh, okay, there's nothing new, and move on. It's not going to necessarily hurt you. And I'm not a Google News expert. Please let me know if there's something else you should be doing. But there are sitemap variants that you should be doing for specific products if you're trying to specifically get on Google. And I actually want to say something really brief too, is that a lot of SEO stuff is usually very general. And there's a reason for that. Obviously, you're trying to get onto Bing and, DuckDuckGo and all these things. But if you are a person that is really striving for one specific thing, look at what that thing is asking for. So for example, this is a podcast. You're likely listening, based on our statistics, you're likely listening on Spotify, and you may be listening on Apple Podcasts. There's a lot of other different services that tune into us, and we thank you for that. However, if Mike and I are like, man, Spotify is doing pretty good, what can we do specifically for Spotify that will help us show up more in Spotify? I mean, taking those steps is probably a good idea, right? Sharing those links, using the creator studio or whatever they call it now, the Spotify for creators or podcaster for creators or something. They keep changing the name, but like using the specific Spotify asks when if they say, hey, can you add this? Can you do that? Just like how Google News is like, hey, you can set up another sitemap. Take a look at what is going on in there. Like Google has, at least a few years ago, it had parameters that it laid out for landing pages. And so when I was asked to make landing pages for people, I would ask, for Google? Yes. Okay. And then I would try to follow those parameters that Google gave me. Like, we're trying to get on Google. Bing and everything would be nice, but our goal is Google. Look at some of those proprietary angles because you may get some pretty good traffic. You may get some pretty good traction on there. And the last thing I want to say about this is that, SEO is ongoing, and content strategy for that matter is ongoing, not only from the user perspective, but also from the search engine perspective. So the search engine's constantly changing things. Users who are using the search engine are constantly changing what they're searching for. And then you, the content creator, are constantly creating content, publishing it, and your strategy may change. I mean, you may have a strategy where you publish once a day. You may have a strategy where you publish once a week. You may have a strategy where you publish once a month, but it's a very long tail, 4,000 characters, whatever thing. And you need to kind of like always check all those things. Like if you're a person that's like, I'm always going to publish 4,000 characters or more. And then Google comes in and goes like, hey, we're punishing anyone at 4,000. We want 3,000. It's like, you better know that and adjust your content strategy to that. Maybe Google wants more people to publish more often, less often. You have to take a look at those strategies. These things are malleable. And this is a major issue that I do find people have with their websites is they will, let's say they get through all the initial like, oh, the CMS sucks. Like as Mike said, the CMS sucks, but they get used to it. It's like, okay, I know what I need when I publish a blog post. And then they start seeing diminishing returns where they used to always get 100 users, 100 visitors to their website every single time they publish a blog post. And then it goes to like, 60, 50, 40. What's going on here? And it's like, hey, you got to be looking at these tools. You got to be looking at analytics. You got to be looking at Google Search Console. You got to be looking at all the other tools out there, maybe some SEO tools, SEMrush, whatever. You got to take a look at this stuff because, I mean, you might be leaving money on the table and you may be going in the wrong direction. Like I said, with the 4,000 characters, your articles may be way too long. And now you're literally being punished for doing what you're comfortable with. And you're going to have to kind of move out of that comfort zone sometimes. This is a major, major mistake I see clients make all the time. They think that everything is just going to be the same. And that is literally not the case from any perspective.
It's a business killer. That's a full-on business killer if your business relies on a funnel that is generated from SEO and content strategy, which
100%.
a lot of businesses do, right? Like a lot of businesses, e-commerce especially, relies on funnels that come from all of these different metrics inside of a content strategy and SEO. One thing I do want to mention on this front, and the thing that like kind of backs up Matt's point even more at the end there, is that now generative engine optimization is becoming a thing. It's not more important than SEO, but essentially for AI chatbots, LLMs, there's a way to create a better schema and a better way for them to congest your data so that the next time that they do training, it'll be easier for them to find and recommend in their search results, right? Because now like Google Gemini is now being built into Google search. So anytime someone searches, they'll get a summary of the results with links in that summary that will help traffic be driven to your sites. ChatGPT does the same thing. Like Perplexity AI does the same thing. Like there's just now a whole other level of strategy that you have to think about. In no way is this more important than SEO. I want to be clear about that. SEO is not going anywhere. But the reality is that GEO will only become more and more prevalent, and so now you have to pay attention to two different things. And if you don't keep up with it, someone else that's doing the exact same thing as you will, and they'll eat your lunch.
That, you know what? That is something that I always tell customers, and they don't listen. They always say like, I want to get to number one Google, and I'm like, you do realize everyone's fighting for that position, and they're sort of like, well, just get me there. And I'm like, you want me to just win every boxing match and become the champ? Like, this is going to be more of a relationship than you realize, where we're going to have to work together, and you're going to have to like do your keyword research and do all these things, or you're going to have to hire me to do that, which is usually out of the budget because it's a big job. And we're going to have to work together in a constantly evolving online strategy that updates articles that are old. Like when you publish an article, that article is not done. Not necessarily, right? Like for many websites it is, if they're just happy with the amount of traffic they have. But if let's say like, Google loves, 10 headings, and then all of a sudden Gemini comes in and they love 6, it's like, you better go back and update those articles and, have the updated date on there too and stuff like that. There's all kinds of different strategies you can follow. But you should update that article and, maybe get it closer to 6, if not 6, preferably. There's a reason why like the same blog post that's like something that's like really general, like something like a search query such as how to make a website. I mean, when people do that, they'll put how to make a website 2025. It's actually an article from 2023 that they've gone in and they've updated. They constantly update. It's like, instead of just like, okay, restart, let's reinvent the wheel each time. It's like, no, like you need to keep that stuff maintained. You need to keep that stuff, I mean, like Mike said, like bots are going crazy right now. AI is going crazy. It's like, you better start looking at some of that stuff. And like we've structured a lot of our guides now, or I shouldn't say a lot, like a couple of our guides now are like structured specifically. I did a lot of testing with Copilot, not GitHub Copilot, the consumer one, where like I go in and I'm like, hey, Copilot, like give me a summary of this, and it'll give me a summary. And I'm like, It doesn't understand. Go back to the article, change it. Oh, it's getting caught up on this stuff. Go back, change it. Okay, now I'm happy with that. Good. And it's able to list out the steps properly. And then I'll ask in a few months, Copilot in general, be like, hey, tell me how to do this thing. And I won't say who I am. Like I'll be logged out. I won't say who I am. And I won't say, where to get it from. And they'll take it from us. It's like, okay, that worked. Like that little bit of effort did work. And this leads actually into like arguably like the most like important part of this, in that going to be maintenance and longevity. We mentioned that like publishing an article, publishing a blog post is not a one and done. And I think a lot of people think it is. And I think a lot of people think it is for a website. That's just straight up not the case. Many clients assume that when you hand them the website, when you deploy it for them, that's it. For some cases, yes. For some very specific cases where it's like, I just want like that Google My Business card thing where they just want the website button. Sure. Right. Set and forget, maybe upgrade it in 10 years. You're not collecting any user data. There's no user data back there. You're not doing anything fancy. You're not collecting credit cards. You don't need to upgrade things. Perfect. Right. Maybe it's just HTML and CSS. It's a static website. Perfect. Right. Displays. Hooray for our lives. But websites in general need constant updates. They need content updates. They need SEO strategy updates, as we've already mentioned. They need security updates. This is very much the case if you're using popular plugins. Like, oh, there's been a security problem found in I don't know like some popular plugin, Elementor or like Beaver Page Builder or whatever. Oh no, like in that hypothetical where something major is found, you better you have to update, you have to upgrade, you have to do things, and you also need to do tune-ups as the site ages. Like, it doesn't matter how much maintenance you do, old information starts adding up. It's hard to maintain, especially if you're a person that's publishing every week or every day. I mean, let's think about this. Like 4 years in, if you're doing 2 a week, let's just say you're taking 2 weeks off for Christmas, you're talking 100 articles a year. 4 years in, you have 400 articles. Are you going to know how many broken links there are? Like, you're supposed to be linking out, right? You're supposed to be linking out to places and you're referring to things. Maybe you even do some interlinking and that thing you interlink to is gone. How many broken links are there? So like you have to kind of do an audit. You have to do a tune-up and go in and go, okay, let's clean all this stuff up. Another thing too is going to be routine site backups. There can be technical disasters, and they could be people too, like people related. Like somebody on your host could make a mistake and accidentally wipe a server. I've literally seen it. I saw it with my own eyes like 2-3 years ago where I was on the 3rd server, like so literally server 3, and server 0, 1, and 2 got wiped. And I was like, oh, this is not good. And then they figured out the issue and they stopped it. I was like, that was close. And that was a human issue. So routine backups, especially off-site ones, is going to be key. If you can do it. I know some tools don't let you, but that's key. And hopefully they're doing it, to be honest. Here's a laundry list really quick. Plugins break, got to update some plugins. APIs need to be updated or replaced. APIs, like if you're using like a MailChimp API or something like that, I mean, MailChimp may change what they do. Like later on, they may not accept certain things because of certain laws or whatever. So moving on. A flow of new content is needed. Not only new, but also updated. So it effectively is new. Update your old stuff. Make new stuff. Your content strategy needs to change. We're in the TikTok generation, I guess, is what I constantly hear from people. Are like essay level articles going to do well? That's a question you should ask. Look at your content strategy, look at the keywords, and look up, especially for your niche, because it also varies per niche. So you have to take a look and say like, okay, like is long form content good? Is short form content good? What is this? And one thing I also notice people forget is the client is going to be confused through a lot of this. They're not going to know how to use the CMS. They're not going to get all this stuff. Does the client need training? Like, do you need to offer training? We offer training. I offer and charge for training. I make little videos for people so that they're able to like do things, and I make it specifically for their website. This is how you update this. This is how you update your call to actions. This is how you update your blog posts. This is how you add new blog posts. And then you can start getting into a little more DevOps stuff with maintenance and longevity. Is going to be uptime monitoring. Like, do you need uptime monitoring? Do you need error monitoring for mission critical sites? If your site's just a little hobby thing and you don't care if it goes down for a weekend, then great. But if it's truly mission critical, I mean, isn't the extra cost of that monitoring going to outweigh the inconvenience of the site going down at an inconvenient time? I mean, I would imagine so. So this is something that, something that you need to consider as well. And like this is I think this is this is the biggest mistake, or one of the biggest mistakes at least, that customers make, is that they don't think websites need to be maintained. They don't think that they need to be maintained. They don't think that they have like a longevity issue, and they think that they'll live forever. And the amount of clients that have contacted us like years later and been like, my site went down, and they just expect us to fix it. It's like, well, hang on, like things break. Like, you buy a car, you drive it for 10 years, something goes wrong. You're like, man, they like Chevy better fix that for me. It's like, what? Like, is it under warranty? No. Well, they're not going to fix it then. So the same thing goes for websites. Like, things need to be maintained. Not everything stays the same. And it's an issue for people, especially if they're on a lower budget, I find. And then that's when you should start looking, I mean, at your scaling thing, and you go, maybe we need to go to a site builder where you're going to have a higher hosting cost, but they're going to do all the maintenance for all the security and stuff. And then I'm going to go in there and set up your CMS. I'm going to set up your design, and then they're going to do all the maintenance. I'm going to go away, and you're just going to work with that software from now on. Maybe that's where you need to be. So this is something that is like really, really integral, maintenance and longevity. Now, I'm not going to cover this today, but I have some extra things that are going to be in the show notes. Just some quick notes on security, compliance, and spam protection. So things like if you need to adhere to certain privacy laws like the GDPR or the CCPA, things like, making sure you have spam protection on your contact forms, and also just touching on things like third-party integrations. Like if someone's like, hey, I want e-commerce, it's like, well, now we got to bring in a payment partner. Are we using Stripe? Are we using PayPal? Is that legal in your country? What about the tax laws? How does the tax work? How does your website going to talk to your internal business workings with like, hey, you're out of stock. Can they back order? Is it going to come back? Do we just delete the page? Like, what do we do? And then I just have a list of a few SEO tools I use: Google Analytics, Google Search Console, Google Tag Manager. Pretty standard, but also like kind of like pillars really of Google or website analytics, and just sort of tooling for marketing professionals, and also myself, because I can read it as well, of course. But I think that's it. That basically kind of drives that point home. I don't think, unless you have anything else to add, Mike, and can run the old conclusion.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely more to a website, and I think that's the point of this episode, right? Like, we covered the main things. There's security and compliance, third-party integration, APIs. Like, there's more to talk about. But the point of this is that when you're presenting a solution to a customer, the building of a website is just one very small part of that solution. You need to consider every part of it to make for a more accurate estimate, to make a better relationship back and forth, to have a longer term relationship and get more longevity from that relationship. Like, just to have a better outcome for the client, they need to understand all the parts that go into the solution that they're buying from you. And the website is just one small part to it.
Absolutely. Like, they're only looking at that polished veil, like I said. Like, it's a veil of like, hey, this is like the culmination of all my work in engineering and everything, and this is my published website. It's like, yeah, man, you're looking at the best of it. Like, you're looking at what's the result of all the chaos and meetings and engineering and servers firing off and APIs being called and data being stored and moved around. Like, you're looking at the culmination. We need to look elsewhere. Like, we need to take a look and say, okay, hang on, like, what made this? Because like anything behind the veil, like if you watch a play, like the play is the culmination of all the chaos that's going on backstage. You're not like, there's a reason why we're not looking backstage, or that the stage is, opaque. Like, we don't have like a window where it's like, what's going on back there? People are like running around fixing lights, and like people are like half in costume, and they're like, free makeup's all messed up stuff. Like, it's chaos. And that's very much the case of websites. But that's it. That concludes this episode. If you're interested in episodes like this, you can go ahead and support us if you like on patreon.com/html, all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons: Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se, Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server, and Stacy Mostler for the website swoonworthydesigns.com. And remember, you can also get up to 20% off your Scrimba Pro subscription. You can go check that out via our link that'll be in the show notes. Almost said show description, in the show notes at htmlallthethings.com. And we'd like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, contributing author on htmlallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.